Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government.
Morning and welcome to the Politics Guys, a place for civil and cordial and thoughtful debate on the issues of the day, of the week. I'm Jay Carson. I'm here with Justin Holmes, professor of political science at the University of Northern Iowa. And Mike is off this week, and we will all be off next week for the holidays, spending time with our family, and we hope that all our listeners are able to do the same. So, Justin, it was kind of a crazy, eventful last couple days in Congress. But yet again, despite predictions to the contrary, the world did not end. And we do have a continuing resolution. I think the government technically was unfunded for about 38 minutes last night, but everyone slept through it peacefully, hopefully. So sort it out for us, Justin.
Boy, that's a tall order. Yeah, it's I guess it's our Christmas present, if you will, that we did not get a shutdown yet again. I will say, I guess I'm a little, just as a big picture thing, I do feel a little heartened that it's been a while since we've actually shut the government down, which is kind of nice, all things considered. But this is sort of that ongoing problem, debt ceiling wise, et cetera, it's forcing a crisis, every 6 months, give or take.
We should probably walk people through a little bit more. The debt ceiling,
yeah, go for it.
Is sort of its own artificial crisis that's sort of put in there, right? We've had government shutdowns before, which are, they're sort of political spectacles, if you will. The serious business of the government keeps moving on typically. But whoever is in office will typically make a big show of closing parks and so forth, or trying to maximize inconvenience to.
You get those pictures of sad kids in front of the National Zoo and
exactly
things like that.
Maximizing convenience to citizens. But when it's over and everyone always eventually gets paid, and the resultant compromise, people get all their back pay restored. But the debt limit sort of ups the ante, if you will, and it's been there for a while. Mike and I have talked about this, that the problem is if you do not increase the debt limit, your ability to keep paying and keep funding the government and your creditors drives you to what they one of these fiscal cliffs, as it were, and the risk of default. Again, it's a little sort of nuclear brinksmanship, right? And part of one of the proposals in the that you'll talk about, I'm sure, in the revised Trump skinny version would have eliminated this, or not eliminated, but moved out the debt cap for a significant amount of time, taking that off the table. But anyway, that's not where we are now. So No, I'm back to you. I'm sorry, I jumped in and I
No,
stole
but I
your
think that's
intro.
an important background because that is that has been really the origin of so many of these shutdowns is that you can muddle along for a long time with budget stuff up in the air, but when you are essentially running the risk of defaulting on the national debt, which would be bad, just to be clear, that really does raise the stakes, and it really, it makes for sort of a nail biter of a process. And, we have gotten into these situations where the government does shut down. You're right in that traditionally, we keep paying Social Security checks in the military and things like that. But it does end up being expensive, like turning it off and turning it back on again, incurs some costs and such. And, there are services that are somewhat important beyond, the military and Social Security that get not done as well. Jokes about the zoo notwithstanding. So, I think in general, it's good to fix it. It's good to get there. This, I think, and there are a number of things that were sort of striking about this. I tend to be more focused on the process, kind of stuff, and the process here was wild. So what we typically get with these things is, I suppose, where the risk of default is potentially handy. Pains me to say that, but where it's potentially handy is that it does give some incentive to actually finish. It does give some incentive to compromise and get stuff done.
There's nothing like a hanging to concentrate the mind, I think.
Yeah, very few people want the government shut down. I mean, every time you'll get some Republican that says, oh, the American people will see how dumb everything the government does is, and this is a great, thing for us. But the public hates these things, and so, nobody really wants to be caught holding the bag there. But the process here was kind of wild. You got sort of this bipartisan compromise, and then Musk, with one tweet, basically torpedoes enough Republican support for it that it can't pass. And this was done under kind of a weird set of the rules where they actually needed a supermajority, not just a majority.
Right.
And Bill number one couldn't even get to the majority there. So. Bill number two, Democrats were largely not on board until suddenly they were on board, and knock on wood, we knocked it off and relatively quickly. But what does this say to you, kind of about the dynamics of the parties at this point?
Well, a couple things. One, I was actually, it's going to sound strange, perhaps a little heartened by how this all played out. One, I would agree that the original CR deal, there was a lot of fat, a lot of pork that I was not particularly happy with, and I think the fact that Elon Musk all of a sudden shows up and calls people out on this is something that's new and different, and I know the left is sort of horribly upset, but I'm not exactly sure why. And I think to me, one of the differences is, hey, here it's Elon Musk saying this, as opposed to whatever typical Republican group might be out there saying, "Oh, spending's too high, spending's too..." I think it takes on a little something, and maybe he's got a big different audience, a bigger audience than the typical political players. So I think that was part of it, and that tanked pretty quickly. What was surprising then, of course, was the failure of the second bill, which was the Trump endorsed and sort of presumably Musk endorsed skinny bill. That in that case you had Republicans who sort of were Trumpier than Trump, shooting that one down. And then ended up with something that was not as good. Now, politics is the art of the possible, and maybe that's what we ended up with was the best possible bill. I'd say what the CR that passed is better than the one that it was originally proposed. not great by any means, but it may be the best possible CR that could have been pulled together given what the numbers are. There are those, and that's something that I guess frustrates me lots of times about the Republican Party is ideology is all well and good, and sticking to your principles is all well and good. But at some point, it comes down to the numbers, and do you have the votes or don't you have the votes? So I think the William F. Buckley famously said that he would support sort of the most conservative electable candidate, and I think that kind of comes down to what we are. I mean, I would hope that Republicans in Congress would try to support the most conservative passable budget. And look, the obvious thing I think that Republicans would like is to get back to I shouldn't say Republicans would like, I would like, get back to regular order where you have 12 appropriations bills that go through committee and they're vetted, and it's not this the CR and the continuing game here. That said, the other piece is now Democrats being in the minority. I think like the debt ceiling a whole lot more than they did a week or so ago, because it is that leverage of the what, do what I want, or I'm going to blow it all up, and believe me, I'll do it this time. It gives them leverage. And look, that's what that debt ceiling piece was built in for, right? To give the minority leverage. And typically it's more of a Republican leverage type piece, because I've argued with Mike over the usefulness of the debt ceiling. And my point there has typically been, look, it's a good reminder, warning sign of, hey, look where we are on the debt, right? It sort of gives you that news peg. It sort of gives you that little bit of a scare of, hey, this is a really bad problem. I don't know how well it really functions in that, but that would seem to be the function of it. So those are my thoughts briefly. Other than I'm heartened to see. It seems as if Speaker Johnson did have the so-called Plan C ready to go, and was able to pull that together fairly quickly. Which I think is a testament that he's probably going to be okay when the Congress, officially the new Congress convenes on January 3rd. It also is heartening to me to see that Republicans did not just go in for a government shutdown just for the fun of it and the spectacle of it, because one of my iron laws of politics is Republicans always lose on government shutdowns. So, and the only exceptions to that are when Republicans always lose on government shutdowns. So I think that, like, it may have worked as a tactic like once, like the first time you tried it, and I'm not sure when the first one would have been. The first one I remember was, I think, 1990, maybe. Okay. I'm certain there must have been a couple before that, but maybe it worked then, but it just doesn't in this day and age. So we ought to come up with a better plan. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things, it's odd to find hope in these things, but one thing that it was interesting to me, I mean, I would maybe disagree about kind of fat, and I know you and I have very different views on what government should be spending money on and how much. Yes. and such, and such is life. But I think part of why these get bogged down is because Congress, part of why they get pumped up, full of so many things, is that Congress has been so gridlocked over the last, we're looking at decades, it feels like, and you're getting more of these kind of giant omnibus bills where, if you're going to have anything happen at all, you've got to throw it all in, and you get these kitchen sink sorts of things.
Christmas tree, yeah.
And I don't think that's ideal either. I mean, I think that, I support a lot more of the spending. I don't necessarily support doing it in that way. There is a lack of transparency there, kind of a lack of good legislative practice. Some question of, what the heck are they doing with the rest of their time? On some level, if they're not congressing, if you will. So I think one thing actually that was kind of a good thing potentially that came out of this, and these feel like footnotes in some ways, but there were two standalone bills that ended up passing as well. So one, there was this blow up over children's cancer funding getting cut out of the big bill. And, if you're looking for a potent image, boy, that's one you don't want to be on the wrong side of, for the most part. I suppose somebody supports childhood cancer, but not many of them. So, this research bill ends up passing by unanimous consent, if I'm not mistaken, afterwards. The other thing that popped up this morning, there was this RFK Stadium bill, basically not a huge deal kind of thing for most of us, but giving control over the old RFK Stadium back to DC for redevelopment, which has been kind of an ongoing thing. And that had been kind of in and out, but then also passed on its own. So it gives me this weird glimmer of hope. I mean, granted, it's a bill that's not very important to most people, and then one that, gosh, you don't want to vote for childhood cancer, but that we might be seeing a little bit of a return to doing standalone bills, in the waning days of the year.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. I'm
not holding my breath on anything big. But...
No. Yeah, we'll see what. Well, I mean, Johnson has said numerous times before that he would prefer to go back to regular order. That was sort of one of his promises when he became speaker, and it hasn't shaken out that way so far. So we'll see what happens this time, whether we have, because as you know, when you have the bills actually go through committee and it's there is much more of this. You have the opportunity to read the thing before you vote on it. And look, as someone who has worked and read, budgets before, it can be insane towards the end in the last couple days when literally hundreds, thousands of amendments are pouring in, and a lot of them don't make sense on their face in terms of why are we doing this? But you have to dig deep and you realize there is someone who really is interested in this. I don't want to use the word loophole or special interest or something like that, but look, that's what happens a lot of times when you're talking about appropriations. So I would say kudos to congressional leaders for not shutting things down. I think well played to Elon Musk and Trump in trying to get a better deal. But there also might be a little bit of concern about Trump about that second bill didn't get the Republican majority he needed. So I'm not sure what message that sends to Trump. Perhaps none.
Well, and the one thing he was on record as wanting is, those changes to the debt ceiling rule. And with Trump, it's that typical, I mean, he says a bunch of things and it's hard to know which version is which. But, he did want to, at one point publicly said he wanted to eliminate the debt ceiling, and that certainly wasn't on the table. So, that feels like a loss. But the other weird thing about all of this is that, he's not president yet. And
well, somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. But, my thoughts on this, I don't know the behind the scenes, but, the media framing of this, it is all Trump and Musk and conspicuously absent is Joe Biden, who I had to pause and remember his name for a second. It's not just that it's early; it's that where's he been? Who clearly has to sign off on this? And the other person is your home state compatriot J.D. Vance,
Yes.
who is just missing in action with this. Again. So,
I don't know that he's been missing in action. As I understand, he's been pretty involved in discussions with congressional leaders and
but he's certainly not been the public face of any of it.
Right. Well, and part of that, I guess, is one, and I think this might make a little bit of a difference, is he still is a sitting senator.
Fair point.
So he's doing that job. And the fight in this case is necessarily in the House. As I understand, and again, from my reading, he's playing a role behind the scenes as sort of the voice of the incoming administration to congressional members. And that might be a little different in that when we talk about, well, Trump isn't president yet, I think there's an interesting kind of political science question of, does having a future vice president in the Senate, does that change the equation a little bit in terms of giving the incoming president a voice in the legislature before an outsized voice in the legislature before he actually takes office? There may be something to that. My other inclination is the fact that Biden has been shrinking. Necessarily, I think since July, right? And for a number of reasons. I think once Joe Biden said he was not going to run, you also sort of cede your role as leader of the party, right?
Which I think maybe, and we kind of talked about this before, is, why did he persist so long? And maybe that's, that was his concern, that, he goes super lame duck.
Nobody listens to you otherwise. Yeah.
Nobody listens to you otherwise. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, once he's, he largely, disappears into the background, after not running again.
Yeah. Wanders into the jungle. But so I think that's part of it. And the other part of it is Trump is an outsized voice in terms of incoming presidents. And part of that is because he's sort of a semi-incumbent, right? It's not as if he is, coming in. It's a known quantity, as much as Trump can be a known quantity, right? But it's someone who is on the scene, familiar on the scene, is at this point undeniably the leader of the party. So I think that's part of it.
And I'd argue that even goes further back. I mean, even before he was reelected. He largely put the kibosh on the immigration bill. For example, and this is this is before he's the nominee, if I'm not mistaken. I may have my timeline a little confused, but he's had this sway, which is always strange to me a little bit. I mean, clearly he got it right, but most of the time you lose an election and you go away. For the most part, people stop taking your calls. By and large,
assuming you're really lost.
Yeah,
but
no,
but I think part of the Trump appeal is, look, he has that grassroots appeal that to a whole lot of folks that cuts across what had been traditional Republican lines, and also he is able to at any moment command sort of a really, like I said, Mike and I talked about this, that he'd love this metaphor, the really big megaphone, right? That say a Bob Dole could not.
This is true. This is true. So,
So I think that's pretty much all. I mean, my thoughts on this, and unless you have anything else to add, we can talk about the state of the corrupt press and where we go from there.
yeah, so we've had a couple moments here with Trump suing the press in recent weeks, and this has been something he's been threatening for a long time. But we have sort of two major ones afoot, and potentially a third that's not a press thing, but that feels very similar. So the first is that we have ABC settle a lawsuit for $15 million. Basically over the distinction between being a rapist and committing sexual assault. We have a lawsuit filed this week in my state, just up the road, against the Des Moines Register over the ill-fated Seltzer poll that showed that Harris was going to win by a couple points, and we all know how that ended up shaking out. But then also we've got kind of these ongoing rumblings of suing Liz Cheney, that's something that's been on record for a while, but there's kind of this Loudermilk report that's come out that seems to be kind of an attempt to make more of a case for that. I think a lot of people have kind of had some concerns about this. These are sort of three different things in certain ways, but concerns about sort of this sort of bedrock principle of being able to criticize a president and do so without repercussions, and the potential chilling effect of this sort of thing. I can preview. I have strong feelings on the Des Moines Register one, and perhaps more sort of legal questions from somebody that's, an actual lawyer.
Yeah.
As far as the other two go. But have at it.
It turns out, I am an actual lawyer, and so I guess the place to start, like the background, the case, as it were, for press libel is New York Times versus Sullivan. And everybody probably learned about this in high school civics, but if you didn't, I'll tell you again. It had to do with the New York Times running an advertisement from civil rights groups that was highly critical of certain public figures relating to their lack of belief, support of civil rights. The threat then that Sullivan then sued the New York Times, saying, "Listen, I've been libeled by this ad that you ran," and the case went to court, and the U.S. Supreme Court eventually held, "Listen, there is a higher burden when you're talking about libel cases, defamation cases, for public figures." The idea being you ought to have a wide latitude, and the press would have wide latitude to report on public figures, and you can get it wrong, essentially. But in order to be liable, if you have a public figure, you have to show actual malice, which typically means you have reason, you knew that what you were saying was not true. Or you acted in reckless disregard to that truth. And then there's sort of little sub variations on how different states have handled it, but that's the gist of it, right? Is if you're going after a public figure, and public figure can be variously described. You can be what's called a limited public figure. You can be whatever. But let's put it this way. If you're president of the United States, you are perhaps the most public of figures.
I'm not sure what gets more public than that, except maybe Musk.
So there's that heightened standard, and the interesting part then is that opens up so here's the thing, right? If the New York Times were to run the headline tomorrow, Justin Holmes, convicted pedophile, you'd have a pretty good case. Right. I don't think you're a public figure, maybe a barely limited public figure for purposes of this podcast.
I feel like you're underestimating our platform here.
Well, maybe. But what I'm saying is you would not have to show that malice. You would just have to say, hey, no, they're wrong. you wouldn't have to show that they lied, right? There can be sort of a negligent defamation. But with this, there is the malice component, and that's what makes it interesting in terms of discovery. And the other piece that makes this a little interesting on the $15 million settlement is that Stephanopoulos' deposition was scheduled for next week. This was kind of a court-ordered mediation, and they would not be ABC would not be the first client to settle a case a week ahead of a deposition that they did not want to partake in. So I think there's
like
stuff
Fox
there.
a little bit.
The other piece of this is, look, what Stephanopoulos said, I do think that's defamatory. And I can send you to cases that do that. So I'm thinking of one in Ohio where it's sort of similar to like there's like a almost exact facts of, look, I was never convicted of rape. You know what I mean? It's sort of the or the line from Stripes. If you would get me, if ever convicted of a felony, and convicted, no, never convicted. There's something to that. So I think Trump would have had had this gone to court, a pretty good case against Stephanopoulos. Plus, there would have been a whole lot of digging into ABC News to see if perhaps ABC News bore any sort of animus against Donald Trump that might have played into that. And the idea that you have a former Democratic press secretary making statement, it was not a good fact. It was not a good case for ABC.
It was also in a not particularly friendly jurisdiction, is my recollection as well. It felt like a higher chance of losing on that regard as well.
So now the Des Moines case, to me, again, putting on my legal hat, that one strikes me as completely different. And to apply the legal term of art, goofy. I don't see I mean, he's sort of suing under a like consumer fraud type thing of consumers of this poll were somehow, defrauded because they didn't get a good poll. And again, that'd have to be intentionally bad poll. One, I'm not sure he has standing to bring that case under that statute. And then also this election interference. I would be perhaps one of the first to argue that those sort of election interference kind of claims would be protected against prosecution from the First Amendment, right? Otherwise, pretty much everything you say in a campaign
would be election interference.
Is election interference, and
right.
It's sort of for the exact same reason that I would say that Trump's payoff of Stormy Daniels was not, improper election interference. I would say the same thing if someone wants to put out a poll saying, look, a wildly inaccurate poll, saying I talked to these people and it shows 90% support for Harris, 10% for Trump, and I think he's toast. It may be a terrible poll. Their reputation may suffer, but I don't see how it's actionable, at least under any statute that I know. And maybe there's something different in Iowa law that they're pursuing here.
I would be very surprised if that were the case.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So again, I'm looking at this kind of mixed bag. Like I said, I think the ABC case was a good one. Whether or not he won, I think it was a colorable case, and 15 million, that's a drop in the bucket. And it's not going to Trump himself. It's going to go to his sort of future museum and library foundation, which is going to be freaking awesome.
10 million copies.
Presidential libraries go, right? It's gonna be the biggest, the best ever.
Built by burly construction workers with tears in their eyes.
It's going to have slot machines. It's going to be the best. Presidential
They'll find a way to
library.
bankrupt that too. Yeah, I think the ABC one. I kind of share thoughts. I think in a lot of ways. I do wonder. I mean, the Stephanopoulos interview just in the first place was pretty bad. It was kind of poor form. I mean, just pushing Nancy Mace on this point again and again and again is where this comes out. But the to me, on some level, I understand the legal distinction, but colloquially between those two things, I'm not sure how much difference that makes, in terms of actual defamation. Is it worse to be?
Yeah, no, it is. At least I can tell you again, the Ohio case I'm thinking of.
But coming out from more of a public, from more of a public perception, and I think a damages, thing. I don't entirely buy that distinction with the public. I mean,
right.
if the, and at this point, I don't know what you'd even say about Trump. I mean, attitudes are so crystallized, like, he could shoot a man on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't change anything. And you could claim that he did and it wouldn't change anything either, whether he did it or not. So to be clear, I'm not claiming that he did shoot a man on Fifth Avenue. So don't sue me.
So no, there's also always an interesting defense in defamation cases. And Trump didn't raise this, or ABC didn't raise this. But there's the sense of, look, this guy's reputation is so bad you can't really defame him. There's that defense of look, everybody thought he was whatever, a rapist beforehand, so we couldn't be we're not liable for all the rest of his bad reputation that precedes our statement. But no, just to be clear, because I love the facts of this case that I'm just mentioning about in Ohio, it had to do with the guy who sued, I believe it was some media outlet, for claiming that he was a registered sex offender. And he said, whoa, I never had to register. Sort of
feels like a very Streisand effect kind of thing, but yeah.
but the idea being, even that distinction, the distinction between registered sex offender and unregistered sex offender, what was enough to say, yeah, look, that's defamatory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but
was this person a public figure?
I think he would have been a limited public figure.
Okay.
In that case, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, that's a good question.
I'm admittedly not an expert on unregistered Ohio sex offenders, so
but no, I guess, but I just it's just one of the. Wait a second. I'm a totally unregistered sex offender, please.
It's like locking your AKC papers.
If that's your defense, it's. But my point being, saying you're calling someone liable for rape versus liable for a lesser sexual offense, that's still enough of a legal distinction, I think, to support a defamation claim. And buying into it, look, if it was someone from maybe whatever cub reporter from the Des Moines Register who made the statement or wrote it in a story, is something different than George Stephanopoulos,
sure.
Right? The sort of the ostensible head of the ABC News team, former presidential spokesman. And there's sort of the assumption that Stephanopoulos knows what he's doing and knows what he's saying, and to your point, in the actual interview, the bringing it up again and again and pressing on it.
It was like 9 times or something like that. I mean,
exactly. It's not one of the sort of typo or mistake, or you print the retraction the next day of we said he was found liable for rape. We actually he was found liable for GSI or whatever it was.
Whoopsie doodles.
Yeah, it's they're what I'm saying is, if I were Trump's lawyers, I think you could make a pretty good case for the malice piece, right? based on those facts.
Yeah. So, pivoting, and I did think there was.
And one more thing on the Liz Cheney potential suit. Again, to me, that's a little bewildering because I'm not sure exactly what legal theory supports that. I think
she should have broad immunity as a member of Congress.
Well, that was my next thing. I was going to say there's going to be all sorts of immunity involved,
like speech and debate clause kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I don't see much there other than, hey, you're saying something that, and again to track the damages. I'm just not. I'm not seeing it, but
yeah, and I want to talk a little more, about the Register one, because the Des Moines Register and the Cheney one, excuse me. I think, I see the ABC one maybe in slightly different terms than you, but I see it as a defensible, sort of settlement. These two, I think, are just both nuts and terrifying, simultaneously. Thinking about the Register one, because this is the intersection of all kinds of things that I'm interested in. The poll itself, we've never gotten a great explanation of what went wrong. The Register itself had an article that kind of looked at it, and it wasn't very good, was my general sense. But I've seen nothing here that indicates any sort of intent. There are methodological choices that get made, and frankly, despite her track record, a method of polling and kind of tweaks to polling, they work until they don't. And so probably the best example of this, sort of a famous polling story, is the 1936 Literary Digest poll, which was kind of the last poll before the rise of doing actual polling. Basically, they did this big mail survey that found that Alf Landon was going to win by like 30 points. And we all know how the Landon presidency shook out. But what gets lost in that is that was the third or fourth time that they'd done it. And with that same methodology, it had worked up until then, so, yeah. I kind of think that's what's going on with the Seltzer poll. Beyond that, I think there are a couple sort of weird things about this. One is kind of the intent on her part. There's no evidence out there that putting out a poll that shows somebody up is going to put them up. Right. Especially if she knew, the assumption of this is that she knew the true numbers and published something different. And even if for some reason you thought that a poll could change people's votes like that, which we have absolutely no evidence that it could, if you're savvy, you've got to know that it's not going to change, 15% of people's votes. I guess the argument would be that if it would depress Trump turnout in that people would give up hope and say, geez, we're down by this much. What's the point? But if you want to do that, you'd have to show him down by 15.
Yeah.
If anything, showing him down by 2, what was it, 2 or 3? That ought to stimulate.
Right, it fires up. Get out there. It's so close. Yeah,
that should be good for everybody. In the end. So, so I think there's that, just kind of the underlying theory of it that's problematic. But I do think, it does get to this, just attempt to be chilling, and I think there's an element of that to the ABC case as well. Even if it's actionable, you could just probably let that go, and we don't get presidents suing media outlets very often.
No, you don't. But
you could just. How many people are really watching George Stephanopoulos at this point? But with the Register, apart from the fact that, look, you can't demonstrate damages, you can't demonstrate malice, it really seems like the goal here is basically, I don't think he thinks he can win, or at least well, he probably does, but I'm not sure that, hopefully his lawyers don't think he can win. But that, this is just a way of sort of inconveniencing them. It's a way of, the register is a small paper on sort of shaky ground. Is an attempt to kind of bankrupt them, just through the process. But
to me, I think I don't think the process is going to be that long or that expensive, because I think that gets knocked out on a motion to dismiss.
Yeah, probably so.
So I mean, I just don't. I don't see any there, right? And again, to the extent he's suing under particular Iowa statutes that I'm not familiar enough with, I guess I hedge my bets there. But the other thing
it feels like a hard case to make for fraud here.
Yeah, and I don't know, is there actually a defamation piece in there as well?
I don't believe there is. I think,
because I was going to say it's not defamation.
It's not defamation to say somebody's losing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one. Yes, it is defamatory to say someone is a rapist. It's not defamatory to say that they are running behind in the polls, because politicians often run behind. There was
right about half of them.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, there's no claim there. And again, in terms of election interference, I think there's plainly the First Amendment defense there. So I would see that getting tossed pretty quickly. I don't know.
And that would certainly be my hope. I think the concern is just that, is this going to sort of stifle criticism from other press outlets, because, this is, even if it gets tossed early, is this a risk we want to take? Is this a road that we want to go down, or do we just sort of acquiesce to out of
well,
I
don't know that you have to acquiesce, right? But because I think the remedy is it gets tossed, and that's the end of it. But I do think on some of the wider points, I mean, there's sort of a public service that's being done by this, right? We want a free press. We want a press that is not constrained and is able to say things without fear of being sued. But at the same time, I think we want a fair and non-malicious press. And to some extent, look, what Stephanopoulos appears to have been doing was like, how many times can I say rapist, within 5 words of Trump, to make that stick? And we went through, we've gone through a couple of years of media reporting, often breathlessly, about him being a Russian asset and all this stuff, which was false nonsense. There's the current a lot of public distrust in the media, in the fact that many people were told for years that Joe Biden is just fine. He's running circles around all the younger kids in the White House, and anyone who says otherwise is a horrible ageist person. So I mean, I think there's a function in our defamation laws that goes both ways, and one is to keep the press honest, and to prevent it from misusing its power. The press has tremendous power, just as politicians have tremendous power. Arguably, the press has more. So while we don't want to see a chilling effect, I would say, nor do you want to see an effect where the press can shut people down wrongfully, and there's no recourse.
Well, should we move on?
Yeah. What else? What else do we have? I guess our next piece was going to be about tariffs. So one of the most beautiful words in the English language, as Donald Trump has said.
It doesn't even have a good mouthfeel, to be honest. There's certain words. One of my favorites that I can't say on a podcast that's rated E for everyone, but that just rolls off the tongue in a nice way, and this is not one of them. So we've talked tariffs before. The kind of news peg that jumped out here that I want to talk a little bit more about, is well, to back up, I mean, Trump says a lot of things, and there is a question, what's rhetoric and what becomes actual policy. But certainly, tariffs have been high up on his list of priorities because it is this beautiful word, and so on and so forth. And the Canadians are ripping us off, and we're subsidizing them, and all these other things. But there was a story this week that came out that I think addresses some concerns that myself and others on the left have had, which is that one, not only are tariffs not a great idea, but two, they probably would not be applied in fair ways, consistent ways, et cetera. So a story came out this week that Trump had sort of said that in particular he would exempt Apple from any tariffs, on hardware, largely because he doesn't want to see Apple lose the phone wars to Samsung. And so, as you're probably aware, Apple is designed in California, but they don't actually make anything. They subcontract all of that out to China. It's actually been on my mind. I need a new phone and have been thinking about trying to get that before January 20th, in fact. But, what are your thoughts here, I guess? Is this sort of thing, is this the kind of thing that we can sort of expect from Trump on tariffs? Do you think he's going to move on these? There's been a lot of pushback, I think, from even some kind of traditional Republican constituencies. Because
I've pushed back, and
I know you've put. I don't know how much of a constituency. Well, yeah, I mean, I like you, but I'm not sure how big of a constituency you are. But anyway, I'm just rambling now. And
no. So to me, I think one of the as a traditional Adam Smith free market Republican. There's two wonderful, or maybe Ronald Reagan Republican. Maybe we can go. So some of the, perhaps the two greatest contributions now that Donald Trump has made to our country is one, gotten the Democrats back to distrusting the Russians, and two, made them into free traders. So I look. I agree. I think tariffs are bad policy, particularly when they are enacted as barriers to trade, for purposes of protectionism, etc. I sort of make an exception when they're being used in the advance of fair and free trade, right? So if you're saying, look, these guys are cheating, we're going to stick a tariff on them until they stop.
And that comes up from time to time where you get dumping and
exactly. And those are
imposed a tariff on your stuff, or
And look, so I think let's play hardball with the Chinese. Now, when it comes to those sneaky Canadians, I guess I'm less concerned about the Canadian-Mexican issue and hitting them with 25% tariffs, which is
you're just saying that because they're going to be the 51st state.
Yes, which he has pledged to do. But interesting that last week Justin Trudeau, in response to Trump's threats of tariffs, had said that he would spend 1.3 billion Canadian dollars. That's 900 million of actual money on plans to improve border security coming from the Canadian side. So I do think a lot of this is Trump rhetorical to Canada and Mexico, saying, "Hey, help me out here on these border issues, or I'm going to slap you with the tariff." And then when they do what he wants, I don't see that tariff forthcoming. So that's my thought there. We'll see when we get there, because I do think there's going to be, no matter even that look, on January 20th, Trump is at his high water mark in terms of political power, absent something like you get a big Republican sweep in 2026, which again would be ahistorical, right?
We've got three examples, and this doesn't feel like one of them.
Yeah, and not yeah, it's not yeah, and again, we don't know until we're there. But I'm saying if you're playing the numbers,
Playing the numbers, this is as good as it gets, and it's
exactly.
it's a pretty slim needle to thread already. But
yeah, and I think there will be a lot of Republicans saying, "Hey, come on, this tariff will not be helpful to me in my reelection bid." Tariffs will be inflationary, which is the whole point of what Trump's trying to. The whole program here is to let's fix inflation. Let's whip it now, so to speak.
Although he's already sort of punted on that, but
well,
grocery prices aren't coming down. He said, flat out said, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think to some extent what he says is maybe he's just stating facts. That things aren't.
I don't think he's wrong.
Prices don't come down.
There's just an irony that I was saying the exact same thing, during the campaign. That whereas he was going to cut my energy bill in half. So yeah.
Well, I do think there could be, will be, fingers crossed, right? Prices coming down, but it takes time to work through the system. Right.
Sure.
There's a combination of one, prices coming down, real wages going up.
And I think the second is more likely than the first, but
yeah,
except for mine, but that's a state thing.
But yeah, that's how you get out of inflation, and it's not overnight. So, and back to the my point on tariffs is slapping tariffs on stuff isn't going to help. Neither, especially in the short term. Yeah.
So, yeah. I think the Canada thing has been interesting. I mean, why we want to poke them? They're going to invade on their mooses or whatever. But it was interesting. I've noticed there's an ad campaign now from Ontario about kind of what an important trade partner they are.
Yeah.
I was shocked. It was during football last week, I think, in the middle of the Bears game. Because I watch it streaming, it's the same ad like 15 times. But they're running clearly this multi-million-dollar ad campaign to try to head that off, which I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that, to be honest. But I have some concerns. This idea of exemption, my need of a new iPhone cheap notwithstanding, I do have this concern about picking winners and losers within.
Absolutely, yeah.
Things and this feels very Trumpy. Everybody in tech is sucking up to him right now, and it just feels like this avenue of sort of ongoing graft and corruption here, where it will be the greatest library ever, in terms of where those donations go, but how much what's Apple going to have to do, what's whoever to stay in his good graces, and I think that's it's not a way to make policy, and really kind of gets to him. It's this very personal, transactional kind of thing that I think is just generally problematic.
Right, and it may work well in private business, but not.
Not to be clear that it did there, but yeah, but it's certainly no way to run a government. So. Yeah, I think that's sort of my concern with this. My first thought was, oh, cheap iPhone, but my second thought was, ooh, this is not good for America. So anyhow, any closing thoughts?
Well, my thought on that is let's wait and see where we are on January 20th or probably the 21st, because the 20th is going to be a busy day with other stuff, but.
The 20th is just that abortion executive order that they all do on the first day, and
no, it's ending the Ukraine war. It's closing the border. It's deporting.
Stapler.
It's sort of there's a lot going on day one, and I think this is Trump's. These are Trump warning shots, right? get people to show up. And look, as we mentioned earlier, he is exercising more power as a incoming president than any I recall. I think there's again a number of reasons for that, but I think this is part of how he's doing that. And maybe if he's smart, right? If he's smart, he is realizing that his maximum power is probably on January 20th at or 12:31 or whatever it is, right?
We're going to be talking first 100 minutes instead of first 100 days.
Yeah. So maybe you do tee this all up to try to get as much buy-in in advance as you can. If so, then you would say, look, then Trump's learned something from the last time around. So,
and I think that's plausible. I mean, I think we're going to talk in the bonus show a bit about kind of the strategies of the parties, going forward, and the ongoing issue here, I think, for the Republicans is that, man, it's a slim majority, and apart from that, I feel like Democrats probably wield a slim majority better than Republicans do. They're so fractious.
No question about that.
It's like herding cats. It's like herding cats with a meth problem, and that seems like an insult to cats with the meth problem at that point. But there's no room for error here, and a whole lot of potential for error. So, excuse me, I think you're probably right that teeing that up is about all he can do, because I have a suspicion that things are going to break down fairly quickly, as far as doing things through legislative means.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, and we are mindful of our time, because when Justin and I get talking, we can tend to run long. Those are the topics we'll be hitting on our bonus show. We'll be talking about Democratic strategery going forward, as well as some Biden pardons and commutations, and other stuff. So please feel free to tune in to that. If there was anything we discussed on this episode that you disagreed with, now why Mike always wants to lead with that, it's sort of like the,
it just feels like it's opening us up for
or that you have a question about, or that you really liked. I think we'll turn that around. We'd love to hear from you. Our email is mail@politicsguys.com, and you can also reach us through Facebook or X, which some may know was formerly known as Twitter. Links are all in the show notes. There's also our Discord discussion forum for supporters, and Mike is on there all the time. Justin, I don't know, how often are you on Discord?
What is this Discord you speak of?
Well, there you go. Okay. Justin and I are not. And again, it's not that I don't want to be. It's not that I don't love our listeners and love talking to them. It is more just that the law is a jealous mistress. And if I were to wade into that, I could not pull myself away.
And I have enough internet problems as it is at this point. Having one more is probably not good for me.
So, but regardless, if you're not already a supporter of the Politics Guys, we hope you'll consider becoming one to help us keep the show going strong. As a supporter, you'll get ad-free versions of everything we release, the full length midweek episode instead of just a preview, access to our Politics Guys Discord group, the aforementioned, where you can interact with me, Trey, me being Mike, Trey, and other listeners, and you'll even have the opportunity to listen in and comment as we record the show. You can support us on Patreon, or you can even sign up for a free trial. If a monthly Patreon contribution is too much of a commitment, you've got issues with Patreon, or you're a current supporter and want to give us a little extra one-shot contribution, we have PayPal and Venmo support options too. You'll find all the links to our support options at politicsguys.com/support and in the show notes. And if you'd like to get a full length midweek episodes, but you're not in a position to financially support the podcast right now, just email Mike at politicsguys.com, and he'll be happy to get that set up for you. Whether you're a supporter or not, we'd appreciate if you could subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever podcast app you use, as well as share episodes on social media. That don't cost nothing. And finally, a very special thank you to our executive producers, Wilma Moreno, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, and Don Oglesby. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Well, actually, we won't. We'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. And we hope you'll join us then.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.